Girl, you think you're salty? I used up all my Saint quartz, and yet I still couldn't get either a Resh or the Emperor of Britannia. This week, we opened on our heroines getting back the results of their latest English tests. Nodoka did above average with a very respectable 84, and of course Chiu got a 100 because it's Chiu. As for Hinata, her dead fish eyes told the tale. Though at the very least, she was 2 points above the average idiot magical girl, and oh god, that face. Yeah, this is the one episode where Chiu and Hinata end up competing for the title of Best Mean Face. I'll let you guys decide in the end, but I gotta say, Hinata's off to a really strong start. I mean, just wow, even though this is a Mitsuru Aoyama episode, that is without question one of the best faces I've ever seen in this entire franchise. Unfortunately, she didn't keep that expression for long, as she remembered that she was going to meet with an old friend from primary school and was immediately cheered up. Said old friend was this girl named Eriko, whom Hinata ended up venting her academic frustrations on. Not gonna say anything yet, but just remember those lines for later. Oh yeah, and she'd also given her the nickname Elizabeth based off of the Eri part in her name. So it would come as no surprise that the titular Natasha of this episode was Hinata's nickname. So what, she's not some vaguely communist femme fatale trying to be a moose and squirrel? Oh god, I'm a boomer. Also, yeah, I could have brought up a certain meme mom since their names are close enough, but I also just finished another Symphogear review, so let's not burn that joke out. And it's not as though it really mattered, as after Hinata showed her a picture of her new friends, Elizabeth, or rather Eriko, immediately decided to break things up with her old friend. Meanwhile, in the Byoken Kingdom, Shindoinen had also started to refer to her cohorts by pet names, though not as a sign of affection, but rather to save up on syllables. I'll admit, it's kind of clever how they managed to contrast Hinata and Shindoinen's usage of nicknames, and it is hilarious how much contempt this lady has towards everyone not named King Byogen, but they do kind of run this joke into the ground over the course of the episode. Speaking of Hinata, she had decided to buckle down and study, fearing that with her current GPA, she might not be able to go to the same high school as her friends who were way above her. And unlike with Shindoinen, this whole dream sequence was absolutely hilarious, especially Nodoka and Chiu's English and Frenchu. The cherry on top of all of it being Chiu's face here. Again, there's just so many great expressions in this one episode. Anyway, the main reason Hinata wanted to make sure they go to the same school was fear that they'd leave her just like Eriko. Thus, she got out all of her books and proceeded to make absolutely no progress between all of her manga and salt mining. Then again, the textbooks she chose didn't seem like they would help with an English test, with most of them just being self-help guides on improving memory and concentration. Though, in Hinata's case, that actually might have been kind of necessary, except for this one. But yeah, we then got a comedic scene that also had some underlying themes as Chiu and Nodoka offered to sleep over to help their friends study. This is what I was hinting at earlier. Whether intentional or not, I hope it's the former, Hinata seems to be a textbook example of someone with ADHD. I mean, lack of focus, forgetfulness, emotional turmoil, those are all some of the most common signs. Now granted, I do have some personal bias about this subject matter, so maybe this wasn't intentional at all, but still, that whole speech she gave Eriko felt like something ripped right out of a textbook about the subject. Combine that with her studying scene, and yeah, it kind of all checks out. Thus, it's kind of understandable why she would have such a hard time hating the books. I mean, as someone with Asperger's syndrome, I can really relate with her plight. I kind of mentioned this all the way back in my episode 13 review of the series, as well as a little bit with Kira and Himari, which, now that I think about it, both of these Kiras are yellow. Is that more than just a coincidence? I mean, when you stop and think about it, yellow is often the color associated with happiness, which for someone with a mental disorder in a country that's still relatively uninformed about it in 2020 might need. It's not always easy knowing that your thought processes are a little bit different than others, and that sometimes you're just not mentally able to hang out with the normal crowds. When I was a kid, much like Nodoka actually, I ended up forcing my parents to move to a different city because I needed to go to special ed schools. Meanwhile in Japan, they deal with mental health issues like this.
Stop crying and do your schoolwork!
Unfortunately, we got no sort of confirmation of this theory in this episode, but they could always follow up on this later and even use it as a part of an emotional climax for Hinata, maybe? Well, for the time being, Nodoka tried to teach her friend how to remember things through some practical visual cues.
ディスファクションって単語を見ると、サティスさんっていう外国の人が
Really? Because I end up thinking about a team of adult men who play children's card games on motorcycles. Also, there's a couple more faces. And as if that wasn't good enough, both had some very cute pajamas, though Chiu and her Jinbei was the clear winner. Because she knows how to be best girl. We also got a little emotional punch from Nodoka, who explained how she didn't have any old friends because she spent most of her childhood at the hospital. Yeah, don't worry, I'm sure the pain from that gut punch will go away by tomorrow. On that note though, Eriko texted Hinata asking if they could meet the next day. And in a nice little bit, Hinata didn't hesitate in accepting the offer in the hopes that they could reforge their friendship. The next day though, she almost chickened out, but fortunately a monster attack halted her as she joined in an attack with a Mega Byogen again? I mean, last week it was justified for Gwaiwaru, who wanted to take a weaker Mega and turn him into a total Chad, but for what reason would Shindoinen ever go back to a Mega? Did the staff want to save the Gigas for more plot-relevant episodes? Or did they want to remind everyone that the Miracle Healing Bottle was still on sale alongside the arrows?
I don't know!
Whatever the case, Elizabeth and Natasha made a run for it. Yeah, Eriko finally called her friend by her old nickname and decided to reveal why their first meeting went south. As it turned out, she had been really nervous about meeting her old friend and was worried about how much she had changed since the last time they met, and when Hinata told her about her new friends...
焼きもち焼いちゃって
Really? That's it? I mean, I'm not saying this sort of thing has never happened, but it's also just such a cliched and honestly kind of childish reason to break ties with an old and close friend. I don't think I would have as much as an issue with this if we'd actually got to know Eriko better, but most of this episode was focused on Hinata's inability to study, which frankly was a much more interesting plotline than this tired trope. Whatever. Asumi took Eriko to safety while Hinata joined in on a very easy fight. Surprisingly, for an Aoyama episode, some of the animation here was kind of fluid. I don't know, maybe he remembered to drink his coffee before he went to work that day. And as I said, they defeated it with the Healing Oasis.
チリキュアあ、チリのようにちっぽけって意味よ
Okay, that legit earned this episode an extra point in my book. With that, the episode ended with Elizabeth and Natasha reconciling, and the latter still failing at her tests.
We hope you've enjoyed No Moral Theater.
I mean, she did say that she would try to study harder next time, though I think Mr. Hiramitsu should start looking up alternative means of education. So, yeah, honestly, the main conflict of this episode between Natasha and Elizabeth was really nothing special, just another tale of jealousy, which was resolved way too easily, making for not such a great episode on its own. There was somewhat of a subplot here that, if taken advantage of, could lead to some much better things on down the line at least. Of this show's original trio, Hinata so far has gotten the least amount of spotlight episodes. This is unfortunate, as she did have a great start at the beginning of the series, an idiot protagonist who was well aware of her low IQ and lack of foresight. She regretted that she was a hindrance to others and did want to improve, and that was somewhat carried over into this episode with her trying to raise her grades to match her friends, but she ultimately failed because of her lack of focus. I really do hope this gets followed up on, and that they do at least somewhat address her possibly having ADHD. Again, some of these scenes feel like more than just mere coincidence. Then again, this is also Toei, whom in recent years have chickened out of tackling some heavier subject matter. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if they threw in the Elizabeth stuff just to avoid talking about it this week. And I think that's my biggest issue with this episode. The main and subplot didn't feel like they really matched well. Hinata was dealing with a serious internal issue with her studies, while Eriko provided a more external issue with her senseless jealousy. If they had just focused on one story, preferably Hinata Studies, I think this might have been a much stronger episode. As is, aside from some admittedly entertaining moments here and there, this was a very below average outing for this series. Hopefully there is still at least a little spark left in Hinata, otherwise she really will be held back in more ways than one. If you haven't seen it yet, I just uploaded the second half of my Symphogear Axis review. Production on it went surprisingly smoothly, all things considered, so I do hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll look forward to my eventual XV review whenever that'll be. For now though, I'm going to tackle a couple of subjects that I've kind of wanted to do for a while, and I think using what was originally going to be a pink lead analysis video as a backdoor is going to lead into something probably much more interesting. For next time, I'm going to try and find the main connections and influences between Toei's big three franchises in a series that I'm calling the Toei Trinity. Just to whet you guys' appetite a little, here's an early draft of the thumbnail I'm thinking of using for that video. Yeah, definitely look forward to that. And until then though, farewell for now my friends, and... excuse me, I got some adult homework I have to deal with. Accounting. Life doesn't change that much as you grow older.